would you say that if we see two phenomena which are very similar, and one phenomena which we do know actually the origin of that phenomena, and the second which is very similar to the first, we do not know its mechanism, its origin, the mechanism of its origin, that if the first one, intelligence, was involved, then eventually the best explanation of the second one also would be intelligence. I can give you a practical example. Let's suppose you see a computer on the table and you know it was made by Apple, okay? And when you see a second computer which you have no idea whatsoever who made that computer, would you say that it is logical to infer that also engineers and computer technicians and so forth invented and instantiated the second computer in the same sense as the Apple computer, which was made by engineers from Apple?
Yeah, I definitely understand that point. And the more information you have, the more of a clue you can kind of get. Like if we understand that computers are made of certain materials that people make, like manufacture, then those become little hallmarks, like little manufacturing hallmarks that they've made these things. Like in nature, and I guess what we're kind of saying about God and the intelligent designer, as opposed to a human who makes stuff out of pre-existing stuff. We don't see people making stuff out of nothing, though. We see people making stuff out of existing materials like wood, metals, things of that nature. But where did the intelligent designer get the stuff from?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, we don't know, but this is also a problem in regards of naturalistic explanations, in regards of the universe itself. How was it instantiated? You have basically two possible alternatives to a creator. One is that the universe popped out from nothing, and the second is that it has always existed. And I would say that both propositions have their problems. But if we put that on side in regards of where the creator got the materials from, if we start, let's suppose, from a prebiotic earth where all the materials to make life were extant, and you have two possibilities. One is that natural forces created life through time and um, just the environment, and the second is that intelligence was actually involved. If you start from that point, then I can give you an example. Let's suppose you require to make a very complex machine. It's a 3D printer, okay? And 3D print, let's suppose that it is made of 100 interacting parts which work together in order to instantiate that printer. Now let's suppose that you want to have a serial production of that 3D printer. Now, if you give to a team of highly skilled engineers which are trained in making 3D printers all the materials and even the blueprints to make that printer and make it in a serial production, then a very important ingredient is missing here. You need the machines actually to make the subparts, the subunits of the 3D printer. And we know that there are, in some places, conglomerates where there are interlinked factories where the parts, some factories make the subunits, the parts, and then they send them to the main factory where the parts are assembled together. Okay? Now, this is exactly what we see with the ribosome, which is basically the translation machinery in the cell, and it is absolutely essential for life to start. And it is equivalent to a 3D printer because it makes proteins. And you cannot have life without proteins. Now, the interesting part is that the ribosome is maybe the most complex um, uh, uh, machine in the cell, and it is made of about 50 proteins and 3 ribosomal RNAs. And these ribosomal RNAs, they are made by other also molecular machines.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting part is that these machines which make the subunits of the ribosome are also made by other machines.
Mm-hmm.
And these other machines, they are made in order to function properly, they are going through a test drive, literally. There are proteins which check if the folding of these RNAs is functional, is correct, and then they are going to operate to make the subunits of the ribosome. But if they are not properly folded, then there are other machines which are proteasomes which discard and catabolize the units, the nucleotides, and recycle them. So what we actually see in the cell is a literal. You can imagine the cell as a giant factory full of hundreds of thousands of smaller factories, which are made from subunits, which are made by other machines, and these machines are made by other machines. And it is basically a circle where everything has to be there from the beginning, otherwise nothing goes.
Well,
So it,
yeah, you make a good point because you kind of strike a sense of really awe because of the complexity and the all the way down to that small level. You're talking about machines that kind of emerge from smaller machines that all come together, and it just seems so striking that some blind, chaotic chance could actually create these well-designed machines that do these really focused sort of things. If the that's the picture that I get and the feeling that I get after listening to you talk about that, and it seems very intuitive. My problem though is that there's scientists, most biologists believe in evolution and believe that there's some sort of natural explanation for abiogenesis. Um, they simply don't have the answer to it. Abiogenesis. How did these structures, how did these life forms and things like that come to be? It seems almost kind of arbitrary at some point, where you distinguish between life and non-life, and it's because you have all of this complexity at work. And most of the biologists that I listen to and I read, and I want to believe as many true things as I can. So I listen to the experts. I listen to what they have to say about their given in their given fields, and they kind of all point to sort of chaotic systems that create these sort of emergent properties that, and it's why certain functions are no longer needed. Like there can be a lot of useless functions in a flagellum or something like that, or even like in a human. There's a lot of problems with the way the human body is our being. It's like our sex organs are so close to our plumbing. Our throat. We choke easy on food, things like that. We get cancer. We get all of these things. The design seems to be lacking in a lot of points. Evolution in itself. Most creatures that ever lived on the earth are extinct. 99% of everything that lived died off. It kind of ran into an evolutionary dead end, according to the experts in the field, and according to the evidence that they present in the fossil record, in the genealogy, and things of that nature. So it just seems like it's a big question for me. Like, what kind of intelligent design is this? Is it really the hand of God, or is it the hand of some sort of chaotic blind process? It may seem unintuitive to say that it's a blind process, but when we look at chaos theory and how they apply chaos theory to things like weather and climate, or the stock market, road traffic, different things, self-assembly in molecules, complex dynamical systems that emerge from seemingly chaotic behavior in nature. This stuff is well established, so it just leaves a question about abiogenesis. So I just don't know. Did you want to say anything?
Katie, on that?
I was having, sorry about that. I was having problem with the stream. The stream stopped and everything crashed out. So I had to reload everything.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm, yeah. I didn't really have anything to add.
Oh, okay.
I think you were doing an
Yeah,
amazing job.
I guess from where we sit, from someone who's kind of a skeptic or someone who's not religious, and I used to be religious, by the way, and I just came to a point, Otangelo, where I started seeing the other arguments and the other side on it. And for me, from where I sit, I'm just at a point where I'm sort of agnostic about a lot of these things. Although I do grant you, intelligent design seems to be more intuitive. It definitely rings true. I mean, after all, we make things, so there must be a grand maker, just like us. But somehow that argument is a little bit fallacious. If we don't really know, because we can't really demonstrate the God, the maker, we can only infer based on our intuitions about what we see in nature. Does that make sense?
Well, I think it applies to the materialistic proposition as well. We cannot test or know if the material or physical world is all there is, or if there is something beyond. So we are all in the same boat. So the simple fact that we only know the material world doesn't by default mean that therefore only the material world is all there is.
100%, I'm with you. Like, I argue with materialists and a lot of people that argue for materialism. There is a lot of problems with materialism to explain things like consciousness, origins, things like that. Because I mean, at bottom of material is non-material. You know, the very fact that we experience an existence, that's an intangible. Yet something as intangible as an experience supposedly comes from something very tangible, like a brain or a body or something like that. There are gaps, there's conceptual gaps between materialism and what we see around us. And I'm the first one to acknowledge that problem. And I think that there could be more to reality that's unknown. But whatever that unknown is, for me, it should be a natural thing. I would infer reasonably to that. Not that I know the truth about it. And the reason I defer to naturalism, Otangelo, is because of track record. Like white goose, you know, if all we see is white geese, you know, for 1,000,000 miles, what makes me think that at mile 1,000,001, I'm going to see, you know, a purple unicorn? You know, that's not reasonable to infer from where I sit. I would just expect another white goose. Now, that doesn't mean that I know that a pink or a purple unicorn isn't going to show up. Like, I don't know that at all. I don't know if there's a tea kettle floating in space somewhere next to the Andromeda galaxy. I don't know that, but I have no reason to believe it until I have the evidence to see it, to know it. But the inference here, when it comes to things like origin, consciousness, and how life came from non-life, those are unknowns. And if I'm intellectually genuine, I'll say, I just don't know the answer. Does that make sense?
Well, as I said, in order for you to actually make sense of the world, you need first to formulate an epistemological framework. And when you have that, then you can ask yourself, what is the distinction between intelligence, action coming from intelligence? What can intelligence do which non-intelligent mechanisms cannot do? And then you look into the world and actually see if you see signs of intelligence. And if you see signs of intelligence, then you dig deeper. And that's what I am doing for many years. And as I said previously, the more I dig deeper, the more I see design everywhere where I look. And that starts from the macro to the micro.
Yeah, I understand it. And I can definitely sympathize with you. I was one person who I couldn't imagine there is no God. Because when you look at a beautiful sunset and you're going to tell me there's no God, after looking at a beautiful sunset, or I experience loving my wife or loving my children, you're going to tell me there's no God? Materialism doesn't make sense. It just doesn't.
Yeah, if
It
materialism is
doesn't.
true, then we are basically stardust,
Yeah,
which somehow complexified. We will return to stardust, and then whatever we did during our lives simply is being forgotten in
yeah,
100,000
forgotten,
years.
and it's like
Nobody
there's no meaning.
remembers what we ever did. So you can basically make, if materialism is true, it doesn't matter how you lived your life, because in 100,000 years
You're going to be
nobody
forgotten.
will remember.
You're going to be
I
forgotten.
don't agree with that though. That there is
Well, I
no
was going to
meaning
say,
if you
right.
know there's still meaning. You know, even if we are from stardust,
I was going
and
to say,
we'll return to
You
that. The
you close the
meaning
stream, right?
is what we give to our own existence.
very true.
You close the stream, right? The live stream.
We are live, but just we don't have all of the viewers anymore because I've had to go to a new stream. But we are live, so I will be attaching the two
Posting it
videos back up later on.
Because I'm seeing here that it is closed. Actually, it is ended.
Yeah,
It has ended.
I'm on a new stream because there's bad weather in my area and it's
Okay,
the
all
stream
right.
crashed
Yeah.
out.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me show you the screen. Hold on, I'm going to copy it for you so you can link in Otangelo. Hold on. There you go. I put it in the chat. But
Okay.
anyways, I was just going to say that it makes sense. It seems sad. It really strikes the emotions, but none of that are good arguments against materialism. Those aren't necessarily good arguments to debunk materialism. Absolutely. They just, they appeal to the emotion. They appeal to some other part of us, not the logical side or the reality of it. Like,
Well, I disagree with you, Scott, because I mean you can make a calculation about the odds to have a minimal genome or proteome to have the first life form, and the odds are so gigantic, and it is so unlikely that life would occur without guidance, and that you would have a functional genome without the right sequence and without guidance, that actually it's not just a feeling or something which you take by emotion, but it is hard data which actually leads you to consider that life from non-life by unguided means is absolutely it's unlikely to the extreme. You can basically say it's impossible, because I mean the odds to have a proteome with 1.3 million nucleotides, which would be the smallest free living bacteria which we know of, the odds are 1 to 10 to the 700,000, and we have 10 to the 80 atoms in the universe.
right.
So,
Well, I was referring mainly to like feelings of love and purpose and meaning. But go ahead, Katie. Did you want to say something to that other part?
Yeah, so I can see your reasoning, but I understand what you're saying about the atoms in the universe and the number, the chance that life would arise the way even the smallest life arising on its own. But I disagree with the scope that you've put into that argument. The universe that we see is the observable universe. There's a lot of scientific models right now which are suggesting that the universe is a lot bigger than what we perceive. And if you take into account, some of those models, then the numbers, there's plenty of chance that it could have happened by itself, biogenesis or other means. There's plenty
well,
of chance.
first of all, you require a life-permitting universe, then you require a life-permitting galaxy, then you require a life-permitting Earth, and just the odds to have a life-permitting Earth is 1 to 10 to the 140th power. So it is extremely remote that you have the right atmosphere, the right size of the Earth, the right distance from the sun, that you have a moon, and I can go on and on. There are so many things that must be just right. Okay, and what I was talking about is in regards of the odds to have a first self-replicating living cell, and you need many different things, and one is a genome which stores the information direct in the making of the molecular machines, the proteins. And as I said, the odds are astronomically small. I mean, the chance to have such a genome which is functional, it is extremely unlikely to the point where we can safely say it's impossible. And then, of course, comes the questions: what do you make of this? I mean, I am a machine designer, and if I have to make a machine, then I sit down and I calculate the size and the materials and everything which is required to make that machine, and that is a mental process. And that's what we see as a parallel in the cell, where molecular machines literally are the working horses of the cell, and they are specified through the genomic information, to the information which is stored in the genome.
There is a point that you're missing in your data though, and it's quite a large point that you're missing, and that is that right now we have we have a sample pool of one. We have one Earth that we know of that has the right conditions. We have one solar system that we know of that has the right conditions. One galaxy that has the right conditions.
Right.
We know of only one planet that is possible to hold that life. So the data is off because we haven't got we can't observe right now,
Only so much.
to increase that sample size.
Yeah, there's a fallacy called arguing from the odds, and this is a very, very persuasive argument. And although its logic is pretty superficially persuasive, it suffers from a very popular statistical fallacy. And the fallacy is that although the odds of something seems to be really high, which it is, it's only based on a limited amount of knowledge. So you're only able to discern probability based on the sets that you have available. And we're talking about the universe. We're talking about something we only observe a small portion of. And then we're not aware of how things develop, from the bottom up. Like if you take things from the quantum level on up, things like causality don't really pertain. And these quantum phenomenon also, stick their head out in biological processes like photosynthesis. Like it's very slim chance that plants, can grow because of the way that they're configured. The energy of the light coming into the plant, it has so many barriers that it makes it very, very low probability that anything would even grow on Earth. But the fact is, nature exploits something called quantum tunneling. And quantum tunneling is how that energy manages to reach into the engine centers of the plant so that they can grow and they can reproduce and so forth and so on. So nature has mysterious ways naturally to make things happen. We don't know everything. And so that just leaves me in this agnostic point of view where, my intuition says, a Superman, a designer like a god makes a lot more sense, it seems. But then there's a lot of other questions too, like why do we have cancers? Why do we have all of these diseases? Why do we have all this extinction and things that kind of work against that intelligent design, if assuming it was for us? And it seems kind of anthropomorphic to just assume that this universe was made with us in mind. Something about it seems kind of arrogant on my part to assume that. And as I look into nature and I look at how things work, the universe is pretty mysterious. It's kind of cold and just uncaring on one hand. But on the other hand, we have things like love, and we have things like beauty, and we have things like aesthetics and logic and things like that. And I think if we focus only on those things, it's easy to can kind of conflate that the universe is for us. But if we were to actually take into account all the things that make life what it is, then we'd see it's kind of a mixed bag. It's kind of chaotic.
Yeah. You've got to take into account, like, Scott is saying that, we don't know everything. And I mean, an example of where we don't know everything, and just shows the error that some scientists can have with some of these calculations, was, the asteroid that, came through from another solar system and came past our sun and then past the Earth.
Right.
The data that they had for the prediction of something like that happening was astronomical, to the point where the main scientist the main professor who predicted that these objects were there, said that it would never happen, that it wouldn't come, that there wouldn't be one that would come through our solar system. And not 2 months later, after he predicted that, one came flying into our solar system and then flew back out again.
Right, and the fact that we're dealing with COVID-19 right now, we're all wearing masks because of intelligent design. I mean, there's something weird about this reality. It's kind of a mixed bag. It's kind of a lot of bad stuff, a lot of good stuff. So I don't really see that we are the end all be all of existence necessarily.
Okay, so let me give you here an analogy. Let's suppose that you would have to make a photovoltaic system, okay? And the goal would be to store electrical energy, and you would use solar panels in order to capture the photons, and then you need about 5 different parts, like an inverter, a meter, a grid, a battery. But you need all these 4 or 5 parts in order to actually store energy in the battery. Okay, so in order to make a solar panel, you need a complex factory, right? Now,
Yes.
if someone would make an entire factory to make solar panels and then produce in a serial production solar panels, but there would not be the other parts like the inverter, the battery, and so forth to store the energy, the solar panels would have no function, right?
Not that we know of.
Yes. So we need all the parts, the required necessary parts, in order to get the end function, which is to store actually electrical energy. But in order to make the solar panels, you require very complex factories. So what you require actually is foresight and planning in order to instantiate the entire manufacturing process, starting from the factory which makes the subunits of the solar panels, and then also the factories which make the batteries, the inverters, and so forth, right? But if you don't have everything, you will not get energy and you will not reach the end goal, right? With
As far as
focus,
we know is how things are now. But like nature sometimes has a way to make things work. It has little workarounds, like quantum tunneling, for example, with photosynthesis.
Yeah.
so
Plus,
let
we
me
know
explain you
that
that.
solar panels and cars and houses and things like that. We know all of these things are built by a designer because we are the ones that are designing them.
Yes,
We,
but
we,
we
we
have a
don't have
precise.
any sample data to show that how a human is designed.
Okay, but we
We
know
don't.
that intelligence is required to have foresight to instantiate the entire
Yes,
assembly
it could
process
be.
from
And
the
I don't
sub.
think anyone's here disagreeing with you on Tangelo on that. It could very well be like some super race of aliens that planted us here and created some sort of algorithm to make life happen. But we don't have any proof of that. It could be a god that did it. It could be an alien that did it. It could just be natural processes that did it. It
Well,
seems that
that's the thing. We do not know of natural processes which have foresight in order to see what is required to make an energy storage system like a
Well,
photovoltaic
And at the same
system.
time, we don't know of any gods either
right, right.
that we've seen
Well,
a god
we need
create
to
something. We
well
don't
we
have
need
any
to work.
data for that.
Well, let me interrupt you here. We need to work what we actually know, and we know that intelligence can make um, photovoltaic systems, instantiate them, has foresight, know what it requires to make the factories, which make the solar panels, which makes the inverters, which makes the batteries. Intelligence is required in order to instantiate all these things. Now, the interesting thing is that in nature, in photosynthesis, we have parallel system here, and you were talking about quantum tunneling, and this is extremely sophisticated, where the energy, the exciting energy from the chlorophylls is tunneled to the special chlorophyll pair in the reaction center, and then
There you
starts
go.
the entire electron um, uh, uh, the electron chain, which then makes the proton gradient work
Right.
and makes ATP. Now the thing is that chlorophyll is basically like the solar panels in our photovoltaic system, because the chlorophyll captures the sunlight and the photons. Now,
Right. Well, let me just cut you off really quick. So what I'm saying though is that it's more like we are mimicking nature rather than nature mimicking us.
yes,
It's more like, nature does things like this, and we can learn a lot from nature on how to design
yeah,
things from
yeah,
our
I mean,
intelligence.
biomimetics is a very important field here. But the thing is that our inventions, they are ridiculous in regards of complexity and sophistication compared to, let's say, a photovoltaic system to photosynthesis, where the engineering is far, far more complex and sophisticated than
But within your
anything
framework,
that
how do
we
you
could
explain
ever.
diseases, and how do you explain how life dies off? Most of life dies off. How do you explain all the suffering and all the chaos that happens in the world? If life was if it was only about us, though.
Well, this is an entirely different question, of course, Scott. But what I think is important to notice here is following. In order for you to have chlorophyll, you require a biosynthesis pathway of 17 enzymes. And the last seven enzymes in that biosynthesis pathway is exclusively the proteins, the enzymes are exclusively used just in that pathway to make chlorophyll. Now, if you have chlorophyll but you do not have the antenna complex where they are embedded in order to, in a joint venture, capture the photons and then tunnel them to the reaction center, then chlorophyll has no function. You
Yeah,
need actually
you know,
both.
right? And you're talking about how the function arises, and it can arise partly and due to the quantum phenomenon, right? It's like a straight shot into that energy center, energy center within the, I guess the
It's in the photosystem too.
yeah. So, but what I'm saying is quantum mechanics itself is based on randomness. We know this. It's completely random. That's the whole thing
Well,
about
well,
Hold on,
yeah.
Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. It's about randomness. In principle, God seems to be more of a deterministic type of God. It seems to be God would be something that isn't random at all, but that he's well thought out and very, look at nature, look at the world. It took billions of years before we got here on Earth. What was God doing for those billions of years? It seems like there was a process, and this process was a natural one. So I don't see how the natural process necessarily leads to God. It just leads to more natural unknown things that we can talk about. But I don't know. Just to cut the conversation short, because I don't want to keep going on and beating a dead horse back and forth. But it just seems like, we're kind of at an impasse, because I don't know. It could go either way in reality, but it just seems like for me, I'm leaning towards naturalism. It's worked for us so far, and it seems to have explained everything perfectly so far. I don't see why all of a sudden we should introduce some supernatural intelligent agent into this whole mix. That just seems to be uncalled for at this point.
Yeah.
Well,
You know,
if
if you want to give some
you are
final thoughts,
entitled.
Antangelo, I think I'm going to start closing the show down soon. So if you've got
Yeah,
anything
sure,
else to
sure,
say,
sure. We end this stream. Just as a last comment, I mean, you have to consider following. Is it possible that random events can make blueprints, and upon these blueprints make machines, computers, transistors, turbines, factories, interlinked factories, production lines, robots, and this is all what we see in the cell.
You're
That
arguing by analogy. Those are
yes,
analogous to what we see in nature, but at
yes.
the same time, the universe is trying to kill us always. We can't
Well,
live
but we
in
are alive.
very small pockets. Most of the world is not habitable. Most of the universe is not habitable for life. So it just seems like, it this fact in itself sort of refutes any idea of some intelligent designer, at least with us in mind. I don't know. What would you say, Katie?
yeah, well, it's proven that the universe is trying to kill us. I mean, look at the previous life on this planet. There was a mention of this in the chat from Dustin about the dinosaurs. What was God doing there with the dinosaurs? Create them and then kill them. It definitely makes more sense that we weren't designed by some all-loving creator. But with the knowledge that we are going to die. These are horrific things that happen in nature, which makes sense in evolution, but doesn't make sense if you've got a god. I mean, there's one. I was watching a documentary the other day, and there's a frog out there which gets eaten from the inside out by its dinner. The food that it eats it is a parasite which starts to eat the frog from the inside out over many days. I mean, that's an awful existence. Now it makes sense in evolution that as to and in naturalistic terms as to why that would be the case. It's survival of the fittest. The better the better thing is the better line is what survives. But it doesn't make sense if you've got this god that's creating things.
Yeah, these are valid points to be considered and to think about. But the thing is that we have error check and repair mechanisms in each of the cell of ourselves, in the DNA, in the ribosome, even to make a ribosome. The assembly process is error checked. It goes through test drive. If that not would be there, then there would be no life. And of course, that requires also an explanation. But guys, it was a nice conversation. You want us to close the stream, so
Yeah, I mean,
Well, it's
feel free
nice.
to call back in. I'll be doing this probably again next week, so feel free to call back in again if you want. If you've got any other questions that you want to discuss, and
Look, the audience gets to hear both sides when you call in. When they hear you talk about this, they're hearing your side of the story, and we want to share our side of the story. So we're being very cordial and fair, I think.
okay, cool. All right, guys, see you next time, and
Right.
bye-bye.
Thank you very
All
much.
right. Bye-bye.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
always
yes.
nice having a chat with Don Tangelo.
Yeah, he's very reasonable, and he's very well versed in his interpretation of science, and he knows the terminology and things like that. I don't know the terminology. I don't know the workings of biological systems and stuff like that, and I just really appeal to some common sense sort of arguments, logical arguments rather, not common sense, but logical sort of, arguments for and against it. And like I say, I don't know. It could be that the world is designed by some matrix designer or some
Yeah.
Alien race, or it could be designed by anything. It's unfalsifiable at this point. And that's not scientific, though. That means it's not a question of science. It's a question of beliefs in your faith. And I'm agnostic on that.
Yeah, me too, definitely. You know, I don't see how, you know, it brings you any closer to truth by, you know, arguing that, you know, because we understand that we need to be the ones designing solar panels. I don't
Mm-hmm.
see how that relates to, you know, to our, you know, us being created. Why you would connect the two. I,
Yeah,
I just don't think it gets us anywhere with that.
it's a little anthropomorphic. It's like, obviously, you know, if evolution is true, and I believe it is, then we humans emerge from nature and we operate sort of on those same rules. So we do what nature does. You know, we're intelligent only on a great scale, but then we see, you know, slime mold in nature doing intelligent things. We see plants doing intelligent things. We see all sorts of systems in nature doing so-called intelligent things. But we emerge from that lower form of intelligence ourselves. We're made up of a whole bunch of cells, a whole bunch of neurons, a whole bunch of stuff that's made up of molecules and everything like that that interact and do intelligent stuff, like keep us alive, digest our food, and everything else. So we are a product of that sort of thing that we call intelligence, but it's just our arbitrary label we put on everything. And we could be projecting, you know, ourselves onto the world is what the possibility seems to be. And so I don't know if we're really just projecting our beliefs on the world, or if it's all just kind of, you know, an illusion, you know, that we're
Yeah,
seeing intelligence where it's not there, or seeing gods where they're not there, you know?
yeah, and you know, so you know, I'd like to have a further conversation with him next week if he wants to join in, because you know, you know, it's always, you know, he never gets, you know, he never gets irate or
Yep.
attacks or anything like that. So you know, he's very good to chat to on that in that respect.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyway, I think I'm going to close the stream down. We did have that error midstream where I had to come to this new stream, so yeah, I think it's best for us to close it down.
Okay. Well, it was a great time, anyways.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much for coming on, Scott. It's been lovely, lovely chatting with you, and we had a couple of decent calls there, so that's all right.
No doubt, man.
Yeah. So, to everyone who's watching, I'm going to be closing the stream down now. Thank you very much for joining us. If you want to support the channel, the links and everything are in the description, and on my channel description as well, for my Patreon, buymeacoffee.com page, and to my merch store as well. So thank you very much for watching. Please remember, ignorance is never bliss. You know, stay home, stay safe, and save lives. And wear a mask as well to all of those who don't.
There you go. And wash your hands.
Oh yeah, wash your hands as well. Yeah. Okie doke. I will put us to the intermission. Play some music at the end there for the intermission outro, and I'll catch you on Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay, man. We'll see you. I'm about to jump on this debate here.
us walking blind. Don't forget that there is always hope to find. Choose your path, walk it well, save us from this living hell. In this broken cage we will not be confined. And when the world starts to burn, at the point of no return, keep a hold of your conviction, tear out the affliction, before the world turns black. Stand up and take it back. As the towers of steel and stone crumble to dust, the foundations of our hope begin to rust. Choking fear, screaming sound, as the reaper comes to ground. You turn to face it down because you must. And when the world starts to burn, at the point of no return, keep a hold of your conviction, tear out the affliction, before the world turns black. Stand up and take it back. For earth, for all, for glory, it's time to end this story. For earth, for all, for glory, it's time to end this story. For earth, for all, for glory, it's time to end this story. For earth, for all, for glory, it's time to end this story. And we won't fight this war alone, my friends. Shepherd's on his way back home again. They won't bring you, won't bring you, they won't bring you to your knees. They won't bring you. Shepherd's on his way back home again. And when the world starts to burn,